Welcome to Your Hero Academia by Fangirl48 on AO3. Chapter 18 USJ Part 2. Everyone froze, fear rising on many of the students' faces, watching as a large black mist, the same one that had let the villains in just a few minutes ago, suddenly appeared in front of them, completely blocking them from the entrance. Izuku and 13 moved in sync, pushing the students further behind them and prepared themselves for a fight. Shit. Eraserhead murmured, dodging a punch, jumping backwards and momentarily looking back at the entrance. That one's gonna be a troublesome bastard. A pair of bright yellowed eyes appeared in the center of the mist, before a low voice spoke. Greetings. We are the League of Villains. Some of the students gasped. Forgive us for intruding on this hollow hall of heroism, but we have come seeking something from you, heroes. If you would all be so kind as to give us what we want, we shall let you live. Oh? Izuku raised an eyebrow, taking a step forward. And what's that? Midoriya. 13 warned, not taking their eyes off of the villain. Don't. We seek the life of the #1 hero, All Might, Kirigiri answered, his eyes narrowing slightly, as though he was smiling. If you agree to our terms, I will allow one of you outside to call him. Izuku felt his heart skip a beat for a second as he processed the words. These villains had come here to kill Izuku's family, his nephew. Mikuru's reaching hands and scared face reached out to Izuku from his crib. Now, you listen to me, 'cause this is your one and only chance. Izuku glared at the villain, pointing down to the plaza. 13 and the other students watched in shock and awe. You and your wannabe softball team get the fuck out of our school. Kirigiri twitched slightly in annoyance. How dare this child threaten them? Who did they think they were? Because if my colleagues get so much as a scratch, if these kids have one single nightmare about this, I will find you and every other bastard you magically teleported in here. There will be no golden rock on this god-forsaken planet. Any of you can hide from me. Sparks started dancing along Izuku's body as most students stepped back. The events of the battle trials came to a forefront of their memories. What can a child like yourself do? Kirigiri goaded, wondering why this particular child looked familiar. Hold on. I think I know you. Before Izuku could answer, Bakugo and Kirishima launched themselves at the villain. The pair hoped to use the distraction the teacher made as an opportunity to capture the mist villain. Bet you didn't see that coming, Kirishima yelled at the sped mist, while Bakugo got himself ready for another attack. No, you too! 13 shouted at the pair. Get away from them! Izuku snapped back into reality and ran at the pair, delivering a sharp smack at the back of their head. Are you two insane? Ow, Sensei, that hurt. Kirishima rubbed his head. I dare you to try that again, you shitty nerd teacher. You two are going to be running so many laps when this is over, Izuku told the pair, unaware of the mist gathering behind them. And when you can no longer use your legs, I'll... My, that certainly was dangerous. An ominous voice came from inside the mist, causing a vein of shiver to run up Izuku's spine. It's no wonder you children are thought to be golden eggs of heroes. Shit, Izuku cursed, only having time to turn and yell out a single command. Everybody, grab a hold of someone. Don't let him separate you. The mist grew in size, surrounding a majority of the students. Some were lucky enough to jump out of the way, or grab hold of something allowing them to stay at the entrance of the building. However, many others weren't so lucky. Numerous numbers of 1A had clutched to each other, suddenly finding themselves scattered around the USJ. the villain's ominous words following them as they fell into darkness. "You will be scattered," the voice called out from somewhere. The villain's camouflage, form hidden from inside the mist. "And my comrades will show you the true depths of fear as you are all tortured and slain." UA Support Department. May had been so caught up wielding that she hadn't realized the red light was blinking until she took off her helmet, reaching for what was her lunch, thinking it was just charming sending the inventor another quick message before his class began. May took another bite of her sandwich, pulling the laptop open. Connection not found. The inventor nearly choked on her food when she pulled up Charming's system. The computer Charming carried on him was disconnected from May's system. Trying not to panic, the inventor tried rebooting the program. When the connection still remained offline, the inventor tried to calm himself, thinking about all the reasons this could happen. Realistically, something like this was only possible if Charming was out of range, or his equipment was being jammed, a dark voice whispered. May grabbed her stuff and ran over to Power Loader, pulling on the hero as they were helping other students. "What the?" the avid hero said, spinning slightly before figuring out who was pulling him. "Hatsumi, are you okay?" "Sir," May answered, showing the laptop screen to her teacher. "Pull up the USJ cameras. I think something's wrong." The USJ? Wasn't that where Racer and 13 were having rescue lessons with 1A today? Power Loader was about to tell his student everything was fine when he noticed how tightly Hatsumi was gripping the laptop. Her fingers were turning slow white from the sheer force. The hero was surprised the computer hadn't snapped in two yet. Sighing, Power Loader nodded, looking at the rest of class. "Everyone keep working on your projects. I'll be back in a few minutes." Walking with the Pinkette to the back room for the school's security cameras, Power Loader punched in the code for the USJ, frowning when nothing but static appeared on the monitor. "That's not right," he mumbled, trying to pull another camera. But then, another, and pulling up the cameras outside the building, everything appeared normal, but the ones located inside the USJ weren't working. Grabbing the phone, Power Loader turned to Hatsumi and told her to return to class, only to find she was gone. Praying the girl wouldn't do something stupid, the hero punched in Nezu's number. "Sir, it's Power Loader. I think we have a problem." Back at the USJ. Izuku took a deep breath as he felt momentarily suspended in the air before gravity kicked back in and started falling. Hitting the water, Izuku let out streams of bubbles that covered up his curse as the words returned to haunt him. "So long as no one drops me into the water far away from shore unexpectedly, I should be fine." "Oi!" a voice said out of nowhere. Izuku froze and turned slightly, seeing a stranger with an obvious water mutation quirk floating in front of him. The happy look on the person's face made Izuku's eyes narrowed. "Sorry, chum, it's nothing personal, but I can't let you go." Suddenly the man's mouth extended wide, revealing rows of sharp-looking teeth. Teeth that were coming at Izuku with the intent of ripping him apart. Even slowed down by the water, Izuku got into a fighting stance, only for Ashiri to appear at the last second, delivering a hard kick to the villain's face. "Sensei!" The frog girl riveted, using her turn to grab Izuku and pull him along as she quickly swam away from the intruder. Breaking through the water's surface, Ashiro tossed her recovering classmate onto the deck and convenience placed ship. Mineta following a moment later, landing with a little more force than Izuku had. A second later, the rescuer climbed onto the ship with them. "Thanks, Ashiro." Izuku coughed slightly, taking off his gloves and wiggling them out. Izuku frowned slightly as he moved onto his jacket. The tech should be alright since it was waterproof, but the fabric apparently wasn't. Okay, so maybe ask May if she could waterproof the jacket next time I see her. "I told you to call me Sue." The fabric girl frowned, crouching down next to the teacher looking worried. "What are we gonna do?" Wait here for the heroes to show up and rescue us." Meta spoke like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "That's not an option." Izuku grabbed his visor, trying to connect with May again. Still nothing. The jamming was most likely extended to the whole USJ faculty. Todoroki was probably right in his analysis. Either this is a too prolonged attack, or we're on our own. Well, the other staff members handle the main assault on campus, but I doubt that since they would also have to fight against the second and third years. This year's current Big Three were much stronger than the ones from last year, and the second years weren't pushovers either, especially the ones who survive having a Racerhead as their teacher. The two students shift uncomfortably as Izuku continued. The more likely scenario is the villains are isolating us and not planning on letting any of us leave. Fuck. Now that I think about it, the break-in with the reporters must have been where they gathered their intel. Ashida frowned. They said they were here to kill All Might. But that's impossible! Mineta spoke, trying to look brave as he made more punching motions with his arms. Once he gets here, it'll be 1, 2, pam, bow, good night, villains. Unless they figured out a way to kill him, Ashido bluntly pointed out. If the villains are confident enough to break into UA, then they must have something up their sleeves to accomplish their goal. Don't forget, that teleporter said if we give them All Might, we could live. But when we were enveloped in that fog, I heard him say to his comrades to torture and kill us. I doubt the leaders of this attack ever had any intentions of letting us go free, even if we handed over All Might. Izuku sighed, as the words sinked into Mineta's head. The smaller male grabbed at the all-or-nothing user's arm, pointing at the girl's words, unable to come out. Izuku was just about to comfort Mineta when an angry voice shouted at them from below. You brats! The same villain as before yelled, Come down here or I'll kill you all! Both the students visibly flinched at the threat. Seeing his students looking so frightened, Izuku couldn't help but wonder how everyone else was faring right now. What zones were they in? Were any of them alone right now? What about the ones with 13? Slapping his cheek, Izuku grabbed his gear and started pulling it back on. As much as he wanted to go after the villains in this plaza where Eraser was fighting, the students came first. Putting a hand on Mineta and Ashida's heads, Izuku gave them an encouraging smile. Don't worry, he spoke calmly. I'll protect you. Walking over to the edge and looking down at the gathered villains, Izuku waved at them, smiling pleasantly. Hello down there. I hope you don't mind, but I have a question for you all. The villains began murmuring amongst themselves before one of the skull-like appearance answered them, identifying themselves as the leader of the small group. Brat. Correct me if I'm wrong. Izuku leaned over the railing, looking down at the group. But so far, all you've really guilty of is trespassing, since we haven't seen anyone use their quirks, nor have you injured us. You're not looking at serious jail time. Oh, and yes, there will be jail time. I won't bullshit you and say that we'll pretend we never saw you. Appreciate the honesty, one of the villains with a spear said, looking annoyed. But get to the fucking point. It's a fair assumption that whoever, or whatever, is blocking our comms doesn't affect you. Izuku took a gamble, noticing how some of the villains shifted in the water. Gotcha. The teacher added the tidbit to his current knowledge of the enemy they were facing. If he was lucky, maybe Izuku could snag a communicator from one of these villains and find out where his students were. This is my deal. You let us leave the boat, pretend you never saw us, contact your people, and tell them not to harm my students. Izuku offered the group, hoping that someone down there was smart enough to figure out that he wasn't just another student. And I'll tell the police and heroes you cooperated. And why would we do that? The one who Ashido kicked yelled up. The villain looked ready to storm the boat currently, no doubt still angry about the strike and looking for revenge. Izuku smiled wider, the villains instantly feeling like water around them dropping a few degrees in temperature. It felt like when they had all been approached by Tomura Shigaraki, the strange young man's one simple yet impossible plan to invade UA and kill All Might within their grasp. One, instead of feeling uplifted, they could actually do the impossible. This brat made the villains feel like chains were encircling them, squeezing the will to fight from their bodies. Because I know what happens to child murderers in jail, Izuku told the Darkly. I've been away for a while, but it's safe to assume that people who mess with kids are still at the bottom of the food prison chain. The group gave a collective shiver. One of the braver villains piped up. They're hero students. You don't know, we might get respect for killing them instead. Some of them might. But do you really think that will save you from all the other prisoners? Izuku replied, his hands gripping the railing, easily leaving dents on the metal. Or me, if so much as one of my students is hurt. Or worse, killed by any of you. The skull-looking villain lashed out with their quirks, fear quickly giving way to anger. Shut up! Using the water around them to cut large chunks into the ship's hull. The other villains watched for a second before loud cheering erupted. Soon they were eagerly talking about what they planned to do with the students when the ship eventually sank. It seems negotiations have broken down, Izuku said, taking off his gloves and sliding them into his jacket. Hands, please. Are you insane? Mineta called as Ashura removed one of her gloves and took the hand offered to her. Why did you? Hand, Izuku ordered sharply. A second later, Mineta's bare skin was touching Izuku's. Okay, this might feel a little weird. Izuku activated Touch Talk and began talking inside the students' minds. This is Touch Talk. Basically, when I have skin-to-skin contact with someone, I can talk telepathically with a person or persons. Lucky bastard. Ribbit, Sue thought, giving a slight frown. How does this help us? Since you're here in the flood zone with us, I doubt the villains know what our quirks are, Izuku explained. That was the worst zone for the villains to have sent the frog girl to. Hiroshima, Ashido, or Bakugo would have been a better choice, to be honest. The hardened user would have been safe from many of the villain's quirks, but would have been hindered by it swimming to the top to get air. Likewise, the water would have completely washed away any of the explosion's sweat or acid. This is a two-way street, since we don't know their quirks. This is just a precaution so they can't overhear us. Good point. Ashido nodded before realizing something. Why didn't you use this with Sero in the battle trial? You forgot, didn't you? Dude, so lame. Moving on, Izuku used his head to gesture behind him. We should take stock of our quirks. Who knows how they might help us get out of here first. I'll go firstly. Mineta lifted his other hand, pulling one of the balls off from his head and sticking it to the ship. I can pull these balls off of my head. They're super sticky and can stick to just about anything. They hang around for a few days before dissolving unless I pull them off. Oh, and they don't stick to me. I just bounce right off them. The two stared at Mineta for a moment before the smaller man cried again. Relax. Izuku took a deep breath, making Mineta do the same. Okay, remember how well you used them in the QAT? Sue, what about you? Basically, I can do anything a frog can, Ashura riveted softly. I can jump pretty high and climb walls. My tongue can extend about 20 meters, and I can take out my stomach or put things in there and remove them later. Oh, and I secrete a toxic mucus as well. It's not as strong as Mina's acid or anything. It just stings a little. Those last two might not be helpful, though. Secret? Mineta felt his heart thump in his chest with all sorts of prevented scenarios running through his head. Luckily, Touch Talk didn't subject the other to the images the other had running through his brain. However, Ashiro did narrow her eyes slightly at the tone. Your quirk could definitely be crucial to our escape. Izuku nodded. As for me, the boat suddenly rocked again violently, causing the three to separate. This is getting annoying. The skull-faced villain yelled angrily. Just sink already so we can kill you brats! Screaming in terror, Mineta began tossing the purple balls into the water as fast as he could. Izuku watched with interest as the villain splashed the waters away, wondering out loud what they were. A plan slowly started to form in his head. Gesturing for the others to retake his hand, Izuku explained his idea to him. Are you insane? Mineta screamed loudly, causing the other pair to flinch at the sudden volume. The frog user frowned slightly. Ribbit, this sounds dangerous. Are you sure it will work? Not a clue. Izuku shrugged. But it's this or them, and I'm like 75% sure it'll work. The pop user screamed again, but Izuku ignored it and went to the ship's edge again, sailing the pair behind him to get ready. Last chance. The all-or-nothing user looked down at the villains. You gonna take the deal? Maybe we should consider it, at least, one of the villains said to the other. If we keep them trapped on the boat until Shigaraki kills All Might, won't everything work out for the best? Izuku froze slightly, hearing the name. It just had to be a coincidence, right? You two idiots! The skull-faced villain smacked the other upside the head before grinning friendlishly at the heroes in training. Don't forget, in the water we have the advantage. And don't you forget, Izuku clammed onto the ranking, summoning his quirk like he had at the entrance exam, only this time not putting as much power into it as when he faced off the 0-pointer. You all chose this. Jumping off the ledge, Izuku used his quirk to both his hands coiling in the light around each other and throwing them over his shoulder before hitting the water. Izuku thrust his arms out and released the built-up energy, striking at the liquid like a hammer hitting a nail. The sheer power behind Izuku's attack immediately caused the water to spread in all directions, so much that Izuku could see the concentrate at the bottom to make a makeshift lake. Despite the pain in his arm, Izuku yelled back at the two still in the boat. Sue, Mineta, go! The frog user grabbed his shorter classmate, jumping with all her might, extending her tongue as she passed overhead and grabbed the teacher, pulling him away with them. You brat! One of the villains yelled as they tried to fight against the suddenly forming current. What did you do? It's called a whirlpool, you jerk, Izuku answered, raising his middle finger at the group. When water is pushed out suddenly with great force, it creates a vacuum. Eventually, all that water rushes back through, creating a permanent you all find yourself in. But luckily for all of you, this is just a small one. Damn, Midoriya, Mineta tried, tears of frustration as he pulled off his quirk, blindly throwing the balls into the water, ignoring the increasing pain of his gulp, starting to bleed. I know you'd be our teacher, but do you have to be so cool? As the sicky fears and the villains spun faster and faster towards the center, ultimately everything started attaching to each other thanks to Mineta's quirk, until the villains formed a sizable sponge-wet blob. And the more the villains tried to pull off the spheres, the more they got stuck. Soon the whirlpool collapsed in on itself, the water creating a gesture that shot up, carrying the villains high into the air before dropping them back down into the created lake, knocking more than a few unconscious. Well, I guess we passed the shipwreck zone, Sue said, giving an unseen smile to the pair. Quite the team we make, Ribbit. You two were great and all, but let's not push our luck. We should get back to the others before more villains appear. I love how Fangirl48 has Izuku reacting to the whole All Might is being targeted, right? His quote-unquote nephew is being targeted, and how he thinks about how his nephew from the past and how he was killed, and he had to walk in and see his baby nephew dead. That traumatizes a kid. I'm sorry, but that traumatizes a kid. Like, no wonder he has PTSD. Like, dude, I would get PTSD if I had to walk into that. I would be throwing up. I would have to go to therapy. I would be in a mental hospital on how that would fuck me up. Or maybe not a mental hospital, but that messes with people's heads, you know? And so I really like how Fangirl48 adds that little thing. Unfortunately, in this chapter, we still don't see what happened in the first couple paragraphs of the last chapter. The closest thing we see is the whole Shigaraki I must have heard that differently, right? No. Right? Kind of thing, which is like, Okay. Just a little tidbit, just a little spoiler. Not a spoiler, just a little tease. But yeah. As always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Join our community Discord server, link is in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.